Okay, great.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And thanks, Matt. I think your talk's given quite a nice introduction to how mine will follow. It feels like part two. So today I'm going to discuss some features of version control and reproducibility that we've tried to integrate here into our statistics curriculum at the University of Glasgow. This is not all my work. Signposted where others have helped as well. So I'm just giving a brief showcase of things we considered and links in nicely with what Matt was discussing as well. So I guess why is a good question. And I think a lot of that's kind of been explored earlier, why we should introduce this. Um, Kind of reviewing degree programs across in statistics, they does tend to be more of an influence in a high volume of theory and maybe not as much of a consistent exposure to some of the technical skills which our students may see once they migrate to the workplace. One such skill is version control, which is becoming ever increasing and demanding. If you go on LinkedIn, search for any kind of data analyst, data science style job, it's almost a necessary skill now as opposed to a desirable one. Um, so there's becoming a lot more features, and particularly in academia too, as I think the last talk highlighted that the use of version control is becoming more prominent. So we naturally think, how can we successfully integrate this into our learning and teaching practice, and not just to students, but also to our researchers and as well. So there are a few things in Glasgow, which I've kind of broadly covered into three sort of initiatives we've looked at. The first one, which I'll talk for the first part of today, is a short version control course, which is designed by myself and colleagues David, Andrew, and Vinny. This course has mainly been designed with the idea of being useful for everyone. We will explore how effective that has been. It's perhaps mixed, but we'll give some of the kind of philosophy why we took certain design considerations. Then discuss some strategies with assessment and how we've incorporated version control into various assessments, particularly in group-based assignments, and also a new assignment this year that my colleagues Andrew and Jen explored with things such as unit testing and peer coding review. And then just rounding off with some practice in course design and how we use version control for designing and maintaining our courses and some of the features that we use as well. The version control course is a kind of case study. Um, so this course, we designed this around approximately 2.5 years ago now. And the idea, this was a 7-unit course which builds from the foundations and the basics, exploring into more advanced concepts and working in team-based projects. We looked at kind of tailored exercises which could be used as standalone learning or can be integrated as part of a course. And I'll go into specifics in how we've integrated this. We also use accessible features within the course as well, using a nice digital accessibility tool we've developed, which will also feed in conveniently to the final part I'll talk about as well. So I'll go into the structure of the course now and how this looks. So when we designed the course, we did have several considerations we had to make. And I think as Matt mentioned earlier, there are so many online resources available, and some of them are generally excellent. And we didn't really want to reinvent the wheel. As we know these resources are here, they're generally great. But we wanted to try and create something that was perhaps maybe tailored to what our students would be exposed to, and what researchers and colleagues here would use. And the main thing was this accessibility for a variety of users. So for the simple single project user case to more complex group-based tasks. So also different areas of expertise across the learners we were targeting. And we wanted to look at a course which covered multiple use case scenarios. So a good example, the experience our undergraduate students and postgraduate researchers have, particularly when it comes to programming, is very varied. This can be different languages. Some may use R, some use Python, some can be using C++. So there's quite a broad spectrum of what can be covered. And also with project-based work, a lot of people may work individually, whereas others are more used to working in group-based project research. And we wanted to reflect this within the structure. So this was effectively the structure that we came to following this. And we tried to design it in a way depending on the desired outcomes which a learner would like to grasp from using version control in their practice. So we split it into 7 units under these broad general senses of the single project user case, someone who just wants to maintain their own code bases for their own projects within the first 3 units. Then expand into the group project user, working with things such as branching, how to do this effectively. Then going more into some of the advanced technical parts like deleting things in your repo and going back in time, which was just terrifying. So you'll probably note in teaching, we do not cover these sections because it just leads to Armageddon effectively. Um, so we try to design it in this unit way. So the main reason being it can be designed for the user's case, but also we viewed this course, we had the intention for this to be integrated into our teaching immediately and not just be a standalone resource. So we wanted to make this as simple as possible. This is the general course structure here. I won't go into the full schematics of what each unit covers, but I'll give a light overview. So within our first 3 units, we're basically introducing what is version control, how to interact with GitHub, the difference between Git and GitHub, which um, is probably one of the things people struggle with at the beginning, I would say. Simple workflow for a single user, pushing and pulling, etc. Then looking at open source projects and how you can obtain other projects from GitHub and even contribute to these with things such as forking repositories. Then moving on to our second unit, looking at branching and branching strategies. So this is for kind of group-based project and how to do pull requests, just working effectively as a team and some nice foundations for users. Then finally our, I say danger zone courses, Unit 7's this. Unit 6 is just a nice work through tutorial in using the GitHub flow model as a team and how to work in separate components and integrate effectively. Then Unit 7, as I said, is the danger zone of advanced user commands such as git checkout, etc. So a little bit of everything there for the type of user. Even for the kind of more advanced user, there's hopefully some things to learn, which is good. Oops, I went backwards. Let's go forwards. Here we are. So some other things as well we considered was how people use Git and GitHub. So those from more of a programming-based background or computer science-based background will no doubt use Git on the command line. Used to using Git, used to using Linux. To other people, this is absolutely terrifying, and I mildly class myself in this bracket as well. So a graphical user interface like GitHub Desktop is a nice alternative, but we wanted to provide research side in the school. There are some people that are really comfortable with using Git, and it's maybe more intuitive than using GUIs. So within our notes, we have this nice feature here, which we've just called the switcher, where the learner can choose to either work in a command line setting or within a GitHub desktop setting. So this works quite nicely. When it comes to our teaching side, we'd always use desktop as it's generally just easier for students to learn, but our PGR learners sometimes will work within the command line. So we've tried to incorporate both styles here. Another thing as well, when we started working with branches, we realised that trying to verbally describe branching can be a bit of a minefield and it's easy to get lost. I found this writing the notes myself that I just was confused what I was talking about, basically. So Dave found this very nice feature called Git Graph, which allows you just to visualize a repository structure like following here. So this is just an example of a repository. In the blue, we just have our main commits, and over here we have some different branches and just showing how these integrate well. And this has been quite well received for the graphical visualization of how these problems work. And our early feedback with the course did highlight this as quite a nice positive. So it's something I would also kind of recommend for anyone exploring teaching version control, particularly getting into branching structures. This is a very useful tool, Git Graph, where it basically just takes the structure of your repository and creates this visualization. So it can be quite a nice additional teaching aid to integrate in as well. So in terms of implementing version control itself within courses, so this academic year and previous years, we are starting to integrate this more across our program and trying to aim and target different student cohorts. And I'll kind of develop more in how this has been integrated within such courses. So we've covered this with our MSc programs. We have an on-campus and an online distance learning program. One course, the data analysis skills, a skills-based course. We've integrated a few weeks of version control, which sits in a group project, which I'll talk about shortly. It's also covered within an honours undergraduate course, covering kind of similar themes and highlights too. And our online distance learning program, this has been recommended for students in the final project, as we find the projects in this side can be quite complex and quite computationally heavy, and using a GitHub repository for code sharing is generally been a lot more efficient in terms of supervision and also for marking as well, and also the Python programming course. We've also delivered this as a training course to our PGR students, so we do this annually, and they also access this too. It does highlight, I think, at this point, I want to mention something that Matt brought up earlier actually was this idea of continuous integration. And when I come to some of the feedback in the course, that is reflected, kind of showcasing more of this reproducibility and not just being in one course and it's kind of, like you said, one and done. And that's been reflected in some of the feedback that we've received for the course also. So our general feedback in how learners have found this course, there is a difference between our student learners and be surprised to see. In general, though, feedback has been quite positive in people working through the course, but there are some differences of opinion between the learning cohorts. So for students, and within the course integration, this primarily focuses only in the first 5 units. So they don't typically review the latter units of the course, though this is available to them if they wish. Main thing they'd like is more detailed examples, more work-through examples, which I have integrated into the teaching of one of the courses this year, actually just a live demonstration working through a repository, which hopefully has provided a bit more example-based work for them. Video tutorials is a big one too. It's obviously a lot of reading when going through reproducibility, and I think as mentioned earlier, it's quite a dry subject, and I think perhaps there is the logic of just some kind of video visualization could perhaps enhance this or at least make it slightly more exciting for the learners too. With our PGRs and staff, they focused on pretty much all the units based on the feedback given. They do find the materials easier to follow than the taught students do, though again, this probably ties back in with the previous presentation. It's perhaps not surprising, as the students may be of a, why am I learning this, or what do I have to do with this? Whereas probably with your PGR learners and staff, they are actually wanting to learn how to do this. There's maybe more of a motivation within their own project, or they see the connection perhaps clearer. But the view I'd say is more positive within those learners, but there's perhaps interesting insights there as to why. The one thing I would say from the taught students that pulled out a lot in this feedback, they did realise the importance of being familiar with version control. Like I think they seem to highlight they realised its usefulness and the practicality of it, perhaps mainly from a career perspective, but that's not surprising. But they did highlight the important thing was they'd liked more exposure to version control and not just seeing it in the one place. Again, kind of emphasizing that potential need of more integration of this throughout a program and not just appearing once. And then and another thing that they did add that I've not mentioned here as well is within project work, so kind of final projects, they would find this quite a useful exercise to explore, and some did incorporate this within their final projects based on the feedback too. So that was the course itself that we designed, which, as I've mentioned, we've integrated into different teaching modules within the school. The next step was obviously to try and incorporate this within assessment. Again, going back to that argument of the pointy stick to make them learn things. So it's been covered in different places. I'm focusing on two cases today. One simply as I teach this course, and the other as I had involvement with the setup. So the first case study was with our MSc on-campus course in data analysis skills. So this is a course that focuses on graduate attributes for careers in statistics, data analytics, and data science, and looking at some of the technical skills needed there in the workplace. We introduced version control actually before we created this course in a slightly more light touch method. Using some online resources which were there and integrating with R, so using Git within RStudio as well. And that feature is still present, but there's less requirement them to follow this method. So we now link with the first 4 units of the course. And in terms of how this works, this is within a group project where the group will work on a data analysis. So they're given a data problem and then asked to use version control to work in this in different steps. So they will make a repository for their analysis, primarily using R. Promotes this working in a collaborative environment, so we encourage them splitting tasks into various components, and they can use branches to work on, say, exploratory analysis, formal analysis, then things such as presentation design. So we try and split it this way, encourage them to review their output using GitHub instead of, I guess, more traditional methods of messaging over Teams or WhatsApp. So a bit more of a formal procedure of doing this. So we tend to assess them most in general good practice. So nice repository layout, meaningful commit messages, successful use of pull requests, working in branches, and general code review. Years, and this has been any mention of it has been positive. They do like this feature. They've seen the use of using it within the group project. Hard to say so much when it's an assessed piece of work how much they love it, but any feedback we've had has been positive, so I'll base it off of that. They did like, I think they did like incorporating it with a different technology. They felt that using it within the group project helped them understand what was going on more than perhaps just reading off the course. Which again, probably not a surprising thing to see. So our second case study, this is my colleagues Andrew and Jen, have done something a little bit more out of the box with version control this year. So they teach an online distance learning course on Python programming and have created a multi-stage synoptic project this year, which has lots of different components. But at the heart of it, the students submit and upload their code using a GitHub Classroom, where each student has their own repository. This is uploaded code to the repository. The classroom setup has helped streamline the marking process as well. The main reason they used GitHub here is for peer coding review, which is one component of the project. So the students are giving a random sample of different repositories to review, and they perform a coding review. Jen and Andrew did provide quite detailed guidance on how to conduct this coding review and the different level of comments that should be there, and then using different repository features here for commenting. The general student feedback in this, I think, from their impressions, because they did a lot of hands-on interaction with this year, as it was the first time running it, and students did seem to find this quite positive. The main reason for this review is it feeds into the final component of the project where they further develop their code. The which I'm going to say with mixed results is the incorporated unit testing as well within the repositories. from speaking to them, this involved a lot of work, a lot of setting up unit tests, a lot of investment with mixed results in terms of output. So it wasn't perfect. Um, Anyone that's worked with kind of unit testing based systems, it's yeah, this just kind of happens. But um, it's one of these things I think with a continuous loop of developing over years, it naturally will improve to a level, but there is still a level of manual intervention present as well. Then finally, just I think I'm hopefully still on time. Maybe got a minute or two. Perfect. Last slide. So some general good practice with course design using version control that we've implemented within the school. Um, so we've used version control in quite a lot of different ways, and I'll kind of talk through some of the key ones here. So within our level one and two statistics courses, so that's our first and second year modules, um, we use GitHub Pages as a method of hosting our lab material online. This used to be um, this used to be incorporated as a Shiny app, but there was issues with things crashing using Learnar, because when you have 200 plus people accessing an app at the same time, it gets a bit buggy. So it's switched to a kind of Booktown component now, and is hosted using GitHub Pages, which has provided a lot more stability. Quite a nice way of integrating these advanced HTML features, such as kind of automated questions within the materials. We also share quite a lot of our course materials across programs, particularly our online distance learning program, using different organizations within GitHub. We use this as a mean of sharing course notes. One of the main benefits of this is if someone leaves, the course notes are there and it's easy for someone to come and access them. You can also look over different versions of the years and how things have changed. So it's worked quite efficiently in the programs where we've used GitHub as this as a almost as a file management system over something such as OneDrive. It's just that kind of history of commits, I think, makes it a lot nicer to go back and make changes, as a lot of our course material may use things such as Markdown and Quarto and LaTeX, and it just kind of helps manage those changes. Um, as I know in Microsoft style products, there is obviously version history, but with these sort of tools, that's not commonly present. And also within our accessible notes I mentioned at the beginning, we have a tool developed for this, which is hosted on GitHub and acts as a downloadable package, and this is maintained there. So it works really well with course materials that are set within repositories and can be set in an automated fashion just to completely convert these quite quickly as well. So that's just some of the different examples we've used within course design. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of our incorporation of version control. Wrap up there and just thank you very much for listening and happy to answer any questions. I'll just stop sharing now as well.
So again, I think I can't see any questions at the moment, but perhaps there's going to be some people are typing as we speak here. But just in the meantime, and we're kind of running out of time anyway, so we might move on to the next speaker very soon anyway, and we can kind of return to questions for you later. But so just did you say that you primarily taught the Git using the GUI, or was it primarily kind of by default the command line? I forget which one you said. I know
Uh,
both were covered, but I was which what was the default, and how did you find that?
so for the default, we've used the GUI
Okay,
um,
yeah,
as mainly, particularly with our undergraduates in statistics, their exposure to like command line
yeah.
style programming is perhaps a bit daunting. My experience of teaching with this, I found it works well. It's a bit more intuitive and perhaps easier to use. The usage of command line I found is mainly with the postgraduate researchers. They tend to maybe use this. I've yet to see a student, I think, use command line. Not to say that it hasn't happened, but I've not witnessed it.
But they will be using they'll be writing code. I mean, the version control is for code, isn't it? Always. And so they'll be writing code for some other purpose. And so that's why I would have thought that the command line would be less intimidating for them.
Mm,
So if they're already, for example, writing R or Python or something like that, it's not as shocking when
hmm
as opposed to someone who has no experience. But as we were speaking there, some question came in from iPhone 8P. You will see it there, Craig. So and they're wondering about if there's a difference in how Git is used and taught in software versus analytics, which I think is an excellent question because I see Git discussed in those two different contexts, and there seems often kind of worlds apart. Like there's kind of the priorities and the reason for using Git in software engineering development is kind of slightly different, importantly different than in data analysis. So, wondering if you have any point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would add as well. I think there is quite a stark difference in how it's used in comparison between the two. I mean, Git itself is its main design. It was mainly designed for software development. That's its
Yeah,
primary purpose, and
yeah,
it's kind of been adapted in analytic style projects. So I feel we perhaps maybe use in essence like some of the kind of heart of what version control is, but we maybe don't utilize all the key features in an analytics project. We try and kind of, I guess, promote the good practice, but a lot of your kind of your classic Git commands, like I mentioned at the end, things like Git checkout, things like this, we say stay away in an analytics
yeah,
project, but
yeah,
within a software dev style issue,
yeah.
it's yeah something you could use quite frequently and comfortably.
Yeah, and just another aspect of that is that when you're doing analytics, you're dealing with data, of course, and that data can be
Hmm
very, very large. And Git isn't really for storing large data. It's for storing small amounts of code, text. And so I think that that's an issue that people who are doing data analysis face more often than people who are doing software development.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.